afternoon. I didn't know you were already here. Make yourself comfortable. I see my daughter already got you a glass of sweet tea. Now, my daughter told me that you was doing some kind of government project, looking to talk to folk about what life was like during slavery. Well, it's nice of you to come out here and speak to me and all, but I don't know if I could tell you too much. See, I was just a little bitty girl back then. I was born during the war. I sure wish my Abram was still living. That old Abraham. Now, he could have told you some stories. I can tell by your face that you recognize that name, Abraham Galloway. But no, that's not him. Folk were always confusing my husband, Abraham Galloway, with Senator Abraham Galloway. And sure, I see how it happened. You know, they was both slaves. They was both born in Brunswick County. They both ran away from slavery, and they both fought for freedom. See, Senator Galloway was real famous around here for all he done. He was an abolitionist before the war. And then once the fighting started, he became a spy for the Union Army. One time, he even went all the way to Washington, D.C. to talk to Abraham Lincoln about what to do with all the freedmen once the war was over. Then after that, he became a state senator for Brunswick County and Wilmington. Everybody knew who he was. Now, not to take nothing away from him, but Senator Galloway was 20 years older than my husband. See, he passed back in the 1870s. My husband passed just a few years ago in 1927. All his life, my Abraham lived in the senator's shadow. Almost like he was a ghost that took to haunting him. And don't you know, when my husband died, that old ghost commenced to haunting me? Let me ask you something. Have you ever had to prove that you were who you said you were? I mean, really, how would you do it? Why, you ask anybody here in town and they will tell you who I am. I am Celia Lee Galloway, Mrs. Abram Galloway, the widow Galloway. Why, everybody knows me. But what if the U.S. government in Washington, D.C. said that you was a liar and you wasn't who you said you was? How would you prove any different? Would you even try? Would you stand up and fight? Or would you give in and say, oh, well, they're the government. I guess they know what's right. Well, honey, I'll tell you what I did when it happened to me. But for you to understand, I have to go all the way back to the beginning. For that, I got to go all the way back to the Abolition War, or what folk like to call the war between the states. Now, like I said, I was just a little girl back then, no more than 5 years old, so I don't remember too much. But there is one thing I can tell you about. Some of it I recollect, and some of it is from stories Mom and Papa told me. See, back then, there was this big fort across the river called Fort Fisher. Now, its walls were made out of dirt. Now, that might not sound too strong, but let me tell you, when those cannonballs hit those walls, they just buried themselves in all that dirt. Not like no wooden walls that fall apart when they get hit. These walls just took hold of those cannonballs and never let them go. It was like no matter what those Yankees did, they could not hurt Fort Fisher. Did you know that that fort was built by 500 colored men? That's right. They gathered 500 slaves from all across Brunswick County, and they built that fort. And those men did a good job. I mean, a real good job. That there fort kept the Yankees out of Smithville and Wilmington up until almost near the end of the war. They sure did. You know, a lot of people don't like to talk about that. But I'm telling you the truth, that's really it. then one day, about 1865, we started to hear cannons being fired from across the river, And it wasn't unusual for these cannons to be firing, because whenever the Confederate soldiers, the Confederate ships would slip past the Yankee blockade, there was always all these cannons, booming around. And so we were used to that, but it only would last for a little while, and it was usually late at night or early in the morning. But one day, the firing started in the morning, and it didn't stop. It kept going for hours. And all the white folk just kept coming down to the water. They look out over the river and they shake their heads. You could tell they was nervous. Some of them even took to hiding stuff like guns and food, stuff they thought they would need if the Yankees were to come. That firing, it went on all day and into the night. And the next day it was the same thing. The thunder from those cannons went on for 3 whole days. Great big clouds of smoke would rise up over the fort and over the Yankee ships from all the cannons they was firing at one another. And the glass in the windows would shatter so much I was sure they would break. And then one night, I seen the most amazing sight. I saw a big bright light go up in the air and come down over Fort Caswell, right across the river. And when it hit, it was an even bigger explosion. Big flames just went up in the air. It looked like a volcano had erupted. And the explosion swept across the river so loud and fast, it sounded like a bunch of ghosts, like flying through the air. Was it the Yankees? Were they fighting at Fort Caswell? No, it was them Confederate soldiers. They set their own ammunition on fire so that the Yankees wouldn't get them. They did the same thing over here at Fort Pender. Oh, what's that? You never heard of Fort Pender? Well, that's what they called Fort Johnston during the war. So anyway, the soldiers from Fort Pender, they set fire to 2 ships that were docked right here in Smithfield, the Cape Fear and the Petaway. I guess they would rather burn them up than let the Yankees get them, I guess. All the white people just kept asking, like, what does this mean? What does this mean? Would the Yankees coming to Smithfield or would they go home? You could tell they was praying that they would. But us colored folk, we was praying too now. But we wasn't praying that the Yankees would go away. We was praying that the Yankees would win. We was praying that the Yankees would take over that fort and come and set us free. Of course, we didn't show it on our faces. We went on about our business. We kept our eyes down and our mouths straight. But my mama told me that deep down in her chest, right next to her heart, she heard a fluttering feeling. She said that was the day that she learned what hope felt like. On that 3rd afternoon, that firing stopped. At first, I didn't even realize it because my ears were still ringing from all of that noise. But then I realized that there was no more sound coming from across the river. Would you believe that that silence was louder than the gunfire? And the white folk kept asking, what does this mean? Did we win? Where are the Yankees going? Are they coming to Smithfield? Or are they going away? And then later that night, we heard a new sound. It was the tramp, tramp, tramp of feet marching. Soldiers was coming. Could it be the Yankees? No, it was the Confederate soldiers, and they were coming towards Smithfield. Were they coming to Smithfield to defend it from the Yankees? Also, no. They came to Fort Pender to join with the other soldiers, and they all took off together. They said they was going to Fort Anderson. They said they was going to take a stand to fight the Yankees over there and keep them out of Wilmington. And just like that, before you could say thank you or if you please, there wasn't nobody left in town but women, children, and men too old or sick to fight. And that's when we knew for sure the Yankees had taken Fort Fisher. They was coming to Smithville, and there wasn't nothing nobody could do to stop them. Oh, me. Then the next day, we saw a boat being rowed across the water. I still remember my first glimpse of that Yankee captain all dressed in blue. I had never seen a Yankee before. I had no idea what they would look like. Some folks said they would be ugly and have horns and hooves for feet. But this one, he was young and real skinny. He had dark brown hair that swept over his face in the breeze. And when the sunlight shined down on his face, he looked more like an angel than a devil. They docked his boat right over at the pier, and the mayor came out to meet him. He was holding one of those white cloths in his hands. And the mayor said there was nobody here to fight him, and that Smithville had surrendered. And child, when he done that, all us colored folk just rushed the boat. We was all trying to grab at and hug and touch the Yankee captain. My mama was all crying and carrying on. I had never seen her like that. I was scared. I didn't know what was going to happen. And then that Yankee captain spoke. And after all these years, I still remember his words. He said, "My name is Lieutenant Cushing, and I of the United States Navy, and I have come to let you know that you all are free. Free." And then when that happened, we all jumped up and we started clapping and singing and shouting, and we all were shouting, "Hallelujah, hallelujah." And then Mr. Gibbs said, "Oh, what's that?" "I'm talking about Gibb Davis." He was a free colored man here in Smithville. See, his daddy fought in the Revolutionary War, and that's how he earned his freedom, and so that's how Mr. Gibb got free. So anyway, Mr. Gibb said, "Follow me." So all us colored folk, we got together and we just started marching down the street. We started on Moore Street, we marched down Caswell and up Nash and all the way to the cemetery. And then finally we came back to the fort, and we noticed that the Yankees had taken down the Stars and Bars flag and raised up the Stars and Stripes. And there it was, blowing in the breeze, looking like it should have been there the whole time. Now I'm gonna tell you something that most people don't know. But during that 3-day battle, there was colored men fighting right alongside the white ones. That's right. They were part of what was called the United States Colored Troops. And some of those men, before they had been soldiers, they had been slaves. And some of them was from right here in Brunswick County. Maybe you recognize the names Abram Blunt or Caesar Evans. Of course, they all gone like my Abraham now, but when they was here, they were soldiers. And they fought at the Battle of Fort Fisher. And those men, they would be marching down the street, and all the little colored boys, when they saw the soldiers marching, they would real quick grab their sticks and start marching alongside them too, like they were soldiers. But me, I just stood still and took it all in. My heart swelled up so big in my chest, I couldn't even breathe. I didn't know the name for the feeling I had then, but I do now. When I saw those soldiers, I felt proud. Now, I had no way of knowing it then, but over there on Galloway Plantation, over there by Royal Oaks, was Abraham. The man who would one day be my husband. Now, he saw those soldiers marching too. He was only 18 or 19 years old then, but he had the same yearning as those little boys with their sticks. He didn't want to just watch those soldiers march. He wanted to be one of them. So he took off from that old farm and he started heading north toward Wilmington. Later on, he told me it wasn't enough for him to be free. He wanted to help fight for freedom for himself and his family. So he enlisted in the Army. And for 2 years, he served as a private of Company I of the 37th Regiment, United States Colored Troops. My Abraham was real proud of being a soldier. And when he was done soldiering, why, he settled right here in Smithville. Now, I bet you think that I'm going to say that that's the time that we got married, but no. I was still a little too young to get married then. See, my Abraham, he had married Miss Lucinda Swain, and they had 7 children. But Miss Cinda, she took sick and she passed right when the youngest one was still a baby. So a year or so after that, Abraham and I did get married. I reckon I was about 27. I became mama to all of his children, and we had 8 more of our own. Yes, we did. Happily married. My Abram, he was real proud of being a soldier, and he was real proud of being a citizen of the United States. He voted in every election that he could, and he was real involved in politics. Well, one year, I think 1895, he became the chairman of the Republican Party of Brunswick County. Now, some folk were of the opinion that he shouldn't have been in charge because he did not know how to read or write. But my Abraham was smart and a very hard worker. People respected him for having been a soldier and for all that he accomplished after the war. When Abram spoke, people listened to what he had to say. When me and my husband got married, at that point, he had given up calling himself Abraham because people kept confusing him with Senator Galloway, so he started going by Abram. And Abram and I were married 37 years. And all those years, I kept a good house, I cooked good food, and I raised our children. Every Sunday, our family went to church at Mount Carmel A&M. We paid our taxes, took our children, sent them on to school, and didn't cause no trouble for nobody. Abram was a mighty fine husband. He was a real hard worker. First he was a waterman and then a drayman. And I was a good wife to Abram all the way up until the day he died. He lived to be 80 years old. And in his will, he called me his beloved wife. By the time he passed, 7 of the children were still living. 3 are Cinda's and 4 are mine. And my Abram, when he passed, he left all 7 of them a little sum of money. And he left me this here house to live in. And then when he passed, my children came to me, they said, "Mama, you should try to get a widow's pension. Papa was a soldier, he fought for it, and you deserve it." So I applied. And don't you know that's when that old senator's ghost came back to haunt me again? See, the government denied my application. They said I was not Abraham Galloway's widow. They said Abraham Galloway's widow was some other woman by the name of Martha Little. So now you tell me, what would you do if the U.S. government told you that you wasn't who you said you was? I tell you what I wanted to do. I wanted to just give up. Forget about the whole thing. I couldn't fight no government. I didn't know how. And even if I did, I wasn't sure I had enough fight left in me. With my Abram being gone, I was lonely and afraid. Of course, I needed that pension money to get by. Times was hard with Abram being gone. I just didn't know what to do. Then one day, when I was sitting here in this here chair, thinking about my predicament, I heard a voice whisper in my ear. I know what you're thinking. Now that old senator's ghost is talking to me. But no, that wasn't the same ghost. That was the voice of my Abram talking to me. I knew it. And he said to me, he said, Celia, you know I was a soldier. You know I fought for our freedom, and I fought for the U.S. government. And now that same government that I fought to save is saying that I never existed. They're saying that what I did didn't matter. They're saying that my beloved wife did not deserve help in her old age. Now, he could have left out the old age part, but the rest rang true. My Abram fought for this country. And now that same country that he fought for is saying that what he did didn't matter and he never existed. Well, I couldn't let that happen. So I decided to do what's right, just like my Abram had done. I screwed up enough strength and I hired me a lawyer. And don't you know that lawyer went down to Beaufort and went and talked to Senator Galloway's widow. Turns out she was a real nice woman. She signed a paper saying that our husbands may have had the same name and had been born in the same county, but they were two totally different men. And after a long, hard fight, the U.S. government admitted that they was wrong, and I was right. They acknowledged that my Abram was a person in his own right, and that he fought for freedom. Not long after that, I got my widow's pension. Oh, and the best part, I'm not haunted anymore. It seems like Senator Abraham Hankins Galloway was resting peacefully in his grave. And as for my Abram, I can still feel him, you know, even after all these years. Sometimes when the wind stirs the curtains just so, or the sunlight catches the dust in the air, I swear I can feel him with me. Sometimes when I'm sitting here all alone and it's late and everything is still, I swear I can feel his hand on my shoulder, steadying me like he always did, protecting me, loving me. Maybe that's what soldiers do. Even after the battle is over, they keep guarding the ones they love. Glory, glory, hallelujah. Glory, glory, hallelujah. His truth is marching on.